Thus far, the term control, as applied to Flesh and Blood, has differed from its traditional role in much of the TCG world. Whereas control in TCGs is often associated with counterspells or board wipes and removal, in Flesh and Blood historically it has largely been more fatigue or heavy defense while pitch stacking to set up your big combos. With Tales, we saw the introduction of the Frostbite mechanic, which brought in a disruptive style of control through slowing your opponents down by forcing them to put additional resources in for their moves. With the release of Iyslander, though, we grew closer to a counterspell-esque style of play. While she doesn't counterspell in the truest sense, her natural disruption applied mid-turn absolutely carries a very similar impact to this game, in that the opponent has to commit permanent resources for a reduced or zero impact. Part of the issue on her initial release, though, was a question of, okay, she can disrupt you for days, but how does she close? And with last weekend's spoil of Iyslander's journey, we have a much clearer picture of how her version of Frostbite Control will manifest into victory. And yeah, it's scary AF. A huge shout out to our channel members for supporting what we do here. If you want to get involved with the channel and the Dice Commando community, please consider joining as a channel member. Remember, these videos are only possible with your support. You can show that support with a like, a subscribe, and by leaving us a comment and sharing your feedback. Community first, and go Commando. Hey there, fab folks. Welcome back to at Dice Commando and Go Again, a fabulous cast. Tons of exciting stuff this last week in the Flesh and Blood world, not the least of which was Iyslander and getting a pretty firm picture of how her play strategy looks like it will develop into the next set Uprising. Now, it may be forever winter with Ms. Iyslander there, but here it's spring and another day of thunderstorms rolling through, so we'll see how this grows. But you know what? Thanks for tuning in. It's going to be really awesome to sit and talk about this. So we are sponsored here by our friends over at FabDB. You guys know them. You guys love them. The best source for basically collection management, deck building, even checking card pricing on the interwebs. When you're over there, consider upgrading your account to unlock all those additional features. Want to really thank our friends at FabDB for supporting us and just doing all the work that they do for the Flesh and Blood community. So now, control is what we're talking about today, right? And control in its truest definition in TCGs is really just a strategy archetype in which you weather the storm, so to speak, pun intended, with Iyslander, while slowly building up your board state or while working towards a final ultimate combo. And this is, of course, by and large what we've seen control manifest as in Flesh and Blood to date, is really that traditional definition of it. However, when most of us TCG veterans think about control, the picture that pops into our head is this smelly dude, the blue player, right? Talking about the traditional, I lock you down, you can't do anything while I slowly do what I want to do, while you sit and bask in my amazingness, right? That's kind of the picture that comes to our head. And we haven't really had that in like the Magic or whatever sense. We haven't really had that in Flesh and Blood until now, right? Because Iyslander appears, at least, to be the first hero that could push us closer to that type of play. Her mid-turn disruption can really stop lines of play dead in their tracks, and heroes without direct attacks are at risk of being locked down and not being able to do much, right? It's one thing to swing with a weapon, but if you try to pump that weapon, she's going to shut you down. Now, in an effort to have a complete discussion around Iyslander control and with none of the feel-bads, PTSD of control from other games, let's go ahead and have a little fun and just get our control player jokes out right now. So, control players, we love you guys. This is all in good fun. But hey, I come up with some jokes now. So, when you sit down against a control player, no one knows who's going to win. But one thing is certain, only one of you is going to have a good time. What did the control player say to his friend? Trick question, folks. He doesn't have any friends. And lastly, what happened to you, sir, in your life that drove you to being a control player?
Very well. Where do I begin? My childhood was typical. Summers in Rangoon, luge lessons. When I was insolent, I was placed in a burlap bag and beaten with reeds. Pretty standard, really.
All right, folks, thanks for bearing with me through that. Just having a little fun, dogging on our good friends, the control players. And that has been one interesting thing to see this week is, there's a ton of people, and rightly so, excited about Iyslander. which is kind of interesting in its own little way, because I think that a lot of what brought a lot of people to Fab was that it didn't necessarily have that kind of play style, right? So it's funny to see that coming, and then now everybody getting excited about it. I mean, to be clear, I think we definitely need it to help slow the game down. I'm pretty confident we need it to get the game down. So I'm really excited to see where this goes. I just wanted to have a little fun. So anyway, we're going to do this today, PTI style. You already see it there on the side. So let's stop screwing around and let's get into this, right? So Iyslander, I want to do a little quick review of her. We covered her when she first came out, but she didn't quite have the tools, right? We all know what she does. She's been out for a while now. You can play that blue card from your arsenal, and when it's ice, it can stop them dead in their tracks, right? I'll throw up the example we used before, right? The CLF Channel Lake Frigid. You can play that in between, right? If they try to do a non-attack, or if they try to do, in this case, like a Bravo, you can really make that dead in its tracks, right? Now, to be clear, if they had just come out with the Crippling Crush, wouldn't have been able to stop that, barring any other Frostbites that they already had, right? Because they would have paid for it by the time you could react to it. But if they do the Bravo for dominating the Crippling Crush, or if they do a pump on their weapon, then you can mess them up good, which is what we've seen her doing to a fair extent in Blitz as it is, right? Stopping Kassai really hard when Kassai tries to pump or give go again or something like that. And then, of course, we have the Blizzard play, right, which we talked about before as well. This is just a rehashed example where you can stop something from getting go again, right? If they can't pay for it, which a lot of times they're running low profile and they cannot. So yeah, that's fine. That's how she was. She was very disruptive, but she had her challenges in closing. But obviously we got 9 new cards this week, plus we got to see her adult version and the new token version for her. So the first 3 I have up are Ice Bolt, Encase, and then Channel the Bleak Expanse. One thing I wanted to note on Ice Bolt, right? Ice Bolt, they're showing you the blue version, which, 2 for 3 arcane damage to any target. So I'm highlighting that. That does differ. I'll throw out Voltic Bolt. Voltic Bolt specifically says to target player. This says to any target. That's clearly because, as we know, the allies are going to become apparently a thing in this set. We've seen the dragons. So I thought that was interesting. And the reason that's interesting, a little sidebar, the reason that's interesting in addition to it just saying that is that they very easily could, maybe some of you maybe played Magic, and like when Planeswalkers first came out, you didn't actually deal damage to Planeswalkers, you dealt it to the player and then you could transfer it to the Planeswalker. And I kind of figured maybe that was how this was going to work for Arcane as well, right? Where you deal Arcane to the player, but you could instead do it to the ally or something like that. Right, it would be something in the rules that said you could do that. This implies that that's not going to be the case, right? So your old Voltic Bolts and stuff, unless they're eroded to do it to any target, I think will only be able to work to player. And I don't see them going back and eroding that. Just print a new card, probably, right? But you have to admit that's kind of an interesting thing to see, and doesn't mean it's bad. It's clearly good if we're going to have allies becoming more of a thing. But it does kind of stink for those old cards. So. Anyway, and then, the other cards out there as well, we don't need to go into them too much. Encase is really cool because it's got like the whole, freezing mechanic, which looks to be able to lock people down. I don't know if that's going to be just an Iyslander. I don't know if freezing will be just an Iyslander or a wizard, I should say, ice wizard type thing. It will be interesting to see as that develops. My guess is it probably won't be, but, we'll see. All right, next we have, I grouped these 3 together as well because they start getting us into really more of like the Iyslander specific stuff. Ice Eternal there is really, really, really scary if she can come up with the cash, which remember, you're doing this on their turn, so should be able to. So, okay, you can disrupt for days, create all sorts of Frostbite tokens and all that. But how do you win? Well, win con is defined, right, with these affliction auras, right? The primary one being Frost Hex, right? So Frost Hex, if they're not able to pop, so first off, Iyslander's generating these during their turn, our turn, whatever, right? You're generating it during your opponent's turn. If you somehow not only disrupt them, that means that those are going to be floating. Then they just expire at the end of the turn. Well, now you have something, right? So any Frostbites you put into play on your turn, anything you generate for them, and on their turn, anything you generate for them, will all go into this. And if they cannot consume those, they're going to take a hit at the end of the turn. And I mean, logically, right, they're not going to like sit on because they would just pay for it, right? So they're not going to necessarily sit on a blue and pay off the Arcane with their AB, right? Because they would have tried to do what they were going to do anyway. So it's almost guaranteed that if you can get to the end of the turn, they're going to take some amount of damage from your Frost-X, right? Like I said, otherwise they had just played it and paid off, right, for the most part. Now, there will be cases where maybe they needed to pay 3 and they had a yellow pitch in hand, so they only take 1. Fair enough. But you're going to take some amount of damage. So suddenly we have her path to win condition. Now, they do have Thaw, right? I mean, the question is, there are going to have to be ways to get rid of Affliction Auras. Makes sense. Now, this one's clearly Draconic. I'm assuming there's going to have to be other stuff in this vein. Otherwise, she's going to be real brutal. All right, so yeah. The win path is defined with Ice Eternal, Frost-Hex, and all the other stuff she's got, right? So, like I said, with Frost-Hex, you got to pop them or die. So she's at the same, and that's why she's really scary, right? That's why I'm saying she's scary as a AF, because not only is she screwing with what you're trying to do, but when she successfully screws with what you're trying to do, you get punished for it, right? She is very much embodying the ultimate form of control. And that's why I think there's a lot of people out there really excited about this, because they can sit there and make you have a real bad day over and over and over again, and kind of play their way instead of your way. So, all right. So now I grouped these two together because I think it's worth a discussion, right? Traditionally, again, this is in other TCG or in the TCG world in general. Traditionally, if you look at the archetypes that are generally there, aggro, mid-range, and control, right? Those are generally your triangle type archetypes, right? Aggro generally, in the TCG world, aggro generally does well into control because it basically races control. It races them before they can do what they need to do. Iyslander's control, though, if we're looking at it in fab terms, aggro is generally aggro is associated with having a lower cost curve, right? Having your red pitches, maybe some yellow pitches, in general a lower cost curve, so that you can get more out of your hand. Makes sense, right? And you get more efficiency out of the cards you're playing because they're red versus blue, right? I mean, that's generally what aggro does. However, with Iyslander's style of play, fab aggro decks are actually the ones at more risk of her because of how they have to pay off the Frostbite tokens, right? So you have this weird thing. I mean, it's not weird. It's just how it develops. But what I'm trying to point out is, typically aggro into control. Control takes mid-range. Mid-range outlasts aggro. Hopefully, right? I mean, that's generally how it works. But in this case, it's probably the other direction, right? It's probably a reversed cycle, if you were to consider it that way, right? Because Iyslander is going to be better positioned into red-heavy decks, whereas your Guardians and stuff like that like to run their blues and just like to keep swinging their hammers or throw the single damage attacks, they're going to be better positioned against her because they can throw their attack before she can mess with it. Right? Now, that doesn't mean she won't poop out more tokens later and they'll take a hit once they're out of their stuff, but she can't make them not swing their hammer, right? So it's going to be very interesting to see, especially in CC, right? So let's we'll just move. I mean, I had it there. We'll skip it. We kind of already talked about it, right? I mean, weapons and straight attacks is the answer to playing her, which means that there is no way out. There are going to be a number of heroes out there that really struggle with her. The ones, again, seems like a theme, but the ones that I'm worried about with her against her are the Rangers, right? Because you go to load the bow, poop on you. You go to play a non-attack, poop on you, right? So I think the Rangers are going to have a really hard time with her. I'm pretty positive the Rangers are going to have a really hard time with her. Your people like your Warriors, though, this is a case where Dorinthea might do well. Because if you shift, right, in your sideboard, if you include a fair number of attack reacts, that instead of doing like the front pump Dorinthea like I like to do, if you instead do like an over-the-top Dorinthea where you're doing the attack reactions, you're going to have a better chance, right? Because you can just kind of put the weapon out there. The problem is, right, with that, if you play a Warrior's Valor, she poops on you. If you play a Pump, she poops on you. So you have to basically just stab for 3. Swing Anisthos for 4, probably. Or actually, in that case, you're probably playing to be fair, you're playing the hammer and the lantern in that case, right? I get it. But you're with me, right? You swing your hammer. So I think attack reacts become better. Not like they weren't already, but I think attack reacts become better. I think your pummels, razor reflexes, whatever you might have within class, I think that becomes really good. And then I think ninja, and we'll have to see how this new draconic / fire, I think it's going to be a fire ninja, but we'll see. We'll have to see how this new one's positioned. My guess would be pretty good. But, if you think about even traditional ninjas they play now, they're actually going to do okay with her for the most part because they typically run a lot of blues, right? So you can still get the Kadachi in on the blue, see what happens, right? And then maybe pay it off. And sure, maybe you only get a Kadachi stab or 2 in there, but you're not taking a butt ton of damage on the back end from not being able to have your turn and taking a hit, right? So that's really where I'm going to be looking at it as she develops, as her decks develop, as we see more cards. I mean, I think it's pretty clear where her strategy lies right now. Obviously, we're, in theory, going to see more cards for her, obviously, or not obviously, you would think we're going to see more cards for her. So there'll be some more development there. But as that develops and as people develop the decks, I'm really going to be looking at, especially with the new set, on how you can come out of the gate with either a big attack or you can come out of the gate with a weapon that maybe has go again and pay it off, right? But I think it's going to be very important in this new meta to be running a type of deck that can deal with having a pretty, you're not going to be able to run low profile. I guess that's what I'm saying. I think it's going to be very hard in this meta to run low profile. Should slow the game down a little bit, you'd think, right? Just having her out there and with what people are going to be including. Yeah, so we'll see how it goes. Even if you're not, I want to be very clear out there. I'm not a huge fan of control as an archetype in terms of how I play it, but its place in a balanced meta is very, very clear, right? So, I was throwing the jabs at the control players earlier, but it definitely serves a purpose. And I think that as painful as it's going to be to sit across the table from Iyslander, I think that her existence is probably going to be a good thing overall. Where we're going to have to cross our fingers and hope and wish and pray and have faith in the fab gods is that they've done their work to keep her balanced. So, and right now it looks like she probably is, but there's a lot of stuff to see in the next set. So anyway, we will see. So let me know, folks, what do you think? What do you think about talking tonight? Are you excited about her? Are you not excited about her? Did I hurt anybody's feelings with jokes? Again, I want to be very clear. It was all in good fun, right? I just gave my little speech. I strongly believe in the value of control in a meta, right? Love you guys. So anyway, all that said, thanks for tuning in. We didn't get any thunderstorms, so awesome. I do want to remind everybody, if you're looking at pre-orders for Uprising, you should contact my friends over at Ganga Games. Remember, use code Commando10 at checkout. 10% off your purchase. I don't get a kickback from that. It just helps my LGS, but it also helps us at 10% off MSRP. Sure, there are places online you can get that and do better, but mine's an actual LGS that runs events. So, wait, you got to do what you got to do, but give him a checkout. And of course, Travis over at Fab Foundry, great guy. He'll be getting those singles in stock. He always does a good job getting those up weekend 1. So that'll be very exciting to round out your collections. But you know what? That's a month plus away. We're not even spoiler season yet. So, but yet we are, because we have spoilers. So anyway, I'm going to stop rambling. Thank you guys very much for tuning in, and go Commando.